And then I'd like to talk a little bit about the Bensons. The Bensons, as far as I know, the best of my recollection, and you have to take into consideration that some of these are childhood memories, and so they are from the view of a young boy. But anyhow, at the GBAHS cottages, they had a store. It was a grocery store, and they also had a little restaurant, and you could buy ice cream there, and they would scoop it up and put it in a little oyster container that had a little metal handle on it. It fascinated me. Thing. Anyhow, we'd sometimes get some money and go buy it. And there is an interesting relationship there in that restaurant part of this. It wasn't elaborate or anything, but that's where, to my knowledge, and it's all oral history, so it's not gospel. That's where St. Francis worship began, and started off with a mason jar as the chalice, and there was some people there, the Bogans, and they were good friends of my mom and all. But then the Bensons, as y'all well know, they built the Benson complex, and he became appointed postmaster. And I think, and this is childhood memory too, I think originally there was a little service station there in front of it. And in that building, with Friendly Service, which was East Hill Grocery, they had a grocery in that building. And in 1956, George Bocas opened his pharmacy. And you know a lot about this, don't you? Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't mind being corrected. I want to know the real. Anyhow, and we'll talk a little bit more about pharmacy in GBAHS, because that's something that I'm interested in. But anyhow, they also, of course, Miss Benson had her dress shop and all that. And there was some people that had summer homes over here too, and you'll recognize some of these names. The Peaks. Peaks are a Pensacola family. They had an electrical contracting company on Balaam Street, Peak McMorris, and they had a summer home over here. And the Turners had Turner's Camp, and they had, that's an old Pensacola family, they had the Buggy Works that became the Chevrolet agency. And the Coes had a lot to do with the development after the war of GBAHS with Casablanca, which was a big subdivision. I was talking to Buzz at Rotary the last Tuesday morning, and he was talking about how significant it was. I had there were no schools over here. In fact, I went to school at M.B. Cook, which was on Cervantes Street, where the Publix is now, with kids that came from GBAHS. They were brought over on an old bus. It was a wonder that it, made it across the bridge, because it was wartime, and so. But anyhow, and so we related that way. And the Martins, some of you know Ann Brody. They have a summer place over here. Some of y'all may know the Kahns. They live over on Duncan Lane. Dr. Kahn was a beloved physician, and his son, who's a judge, and his wife Janet lives over there on Duncan. And the Heinbergs have a big significance in GBAHS, because Dr. Heinberg, who comes from a Pensacola family, he became the first mayor of GBAHS. A lot of the stuff, for some reason, they're sort of out of kilter, but the bridges were all toll bridges, so we're very blessed today that we don't have to pay a toll. I talked about the wooden bridge going to the beach, and how we used to walk over there. Well, we would stay at Guthries Cottages. My uncle, when he was on vacation for 2 weeks, he built a wharf out in front. So therefore, we could take our crab traps and put them down and catch crabs, and then we could walk a crab and walk across the shoreline there with our nets and catch crab and boil them and have a good crab boil. By the way, I made a grammar mistake in that text. I said have instead of had. I couldn't believe I did that. I reread that text and I thought, oh, I bet she said, literally. God help us, she probably said. Anyhow, let's see what else we want to talk about. Well, do y'all have anything too? Add in if you don't agree.
Where was the swing bridge?
Well, I don't know about that. What do you know about the swing
Well, my
bridge?
great uncle worked on the swing bridge, and I don't know if it was to the beach.
Oh, was it a drawbridge?
No,
There was a drawbridge.
It was a
Oh, it
turntable.
had a turntable that opened to left.
Yeah, you
From
can see
the
the
pictures
pedestals
that I
when you go
see.
across the Bob Sykes Bridge here.
Oh,
You
yeah.
look down, there's these big circular concrete pillars. I think that's what part of
That's
it
where it
was.
is.
Yeah,
Did
there
you
was
know-
I think the bridge, the Bay Bridge, it lifted up.
It
Right.
lifted up.
And the first bridge that went to the beach was a wooden bridge, and I don't think, I'm not sure.
Wish I had brought that one. Did you know the Johnsons, Arthur and Betty Ann Johnson?
I do, because Miss Johnson was my granddaddy's secretary when I was a 5-year-old boy.
She's my great aunt.
She is.
Was. Excuse me.
Let me tell you, she's a wonderful lady, and I have wonderful memories. She was always sweet to me. She'd be up on the balcony above the clothing store, Ellie Noble's Clothing, and she was a good customer of our drugstore, and I filled a many a prescription for her. And I know she wrote the book too, and I can't find my copy, but I've got a copy someplace.
I was going to say, you can't have mine. It's autographed.
Well,
But-
you are very blessed. And
Talk
then-
about crabbing, we used to
Yeah.
go down every summer, spend at anybody's house.
So how did she get interested in Guthries? I know that she lived in later years in Guthries. But
Well, they bought that lot for like $25, or the house for $25 or something. They
Where
moved
was-
over
where
on the
was
lot, right over behind the Taco Bell. The Pfeiffers were there on Duncan Road.
Oh yeah, back
On
in
Duncan
there
Road.
with the Pfeiffers and then Lively's, and then later in years, the Lively's had that restaurant back there that
Right,
had very
Dolphins
good
on the
food.
Bay.
Dolphins on the bay.
Dolphins on the Bay, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I want. I want some interaction.
I was just going to ask you a question. When I first moved to Pensacola in 1961, there were Moulton drugstores. Is that your family?
Yeah, I grew up starting off doing the toilets and sweeping the floors. And it's now that you bring it up, the 4 pharmacists in Guthries, and I was the youngest one. George had worked over by Old Sacred Heart. Max had worked over by Old Sacred Heart, and I had interned over there, and then the manager of our store over next to Delsham's, Vernon Cole, he had worked there. So all 4 of us, and I think at that point Andy Cafera, who had a little drugstore, he had a drugstore in Pensacola on East Hill too, but he and his he had been in the war, and his sister was a pharmacist too, Connie. And they had a drugstore in Mr. Hoffman's first shopping center, the one where Bank of America is. And we need to talk a little bit about that. But I appreciate you bringing
But
that.
I lived in Pensacola, and there was one in a little shopping center on the corner of Fairfield and Davis.
I remember,
And the
I go
pharmacist-
by there a
and I
lot.
remember his name was George, and I can't remember his last name.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
And I will remember, I can know it just as well as my own. He helped to build that store. Mr. Doblestein started it out. Since we brought up about the Hoffmans, Mr. Hoffman built the smaller shopping center, which is where Bank of America is today. And then he built a bigger one, and the first big grocery store in GBAHS was Jitney Jungle. And in George opened his store over in the Benson Shopping Center in 1956. But when the new shopping center that Mr. Hoffman built, he and Max Jordan went in partnership, and
Focus, Jordan.
in Boca Jordan, and the soda fountain. Many people ate at that soda fountain and have good memories. And also that Jitney Jungle grocery store. And then in about 1968, Mr. Jenkins started construction of where Delchamps was and where today the neighborhood market is. And the Jenkins and my uncle in Moulton were good friends. My uncle was a pharmacist over there. And we opened a drugstore over there. And when I got out of the Army, that was where I worked. And that's why I started living in GBAHS at the English Coves, because of that drugstore. And I really enjoyed my time in that shopping center. It was torn down, and the new one was in the original one, a TG&Y that everybody enjoyed. And there was a florist next to the drugstore. And we had a really good time. And a big event in GBAHS is when we got our first drive-in Hardee's. It's over there where that Mexican restaurant is. Not Mexican, well, it was a Mexican restaurant that got shut down because of drugs. And then, and today it's the Asian restaurant, Fuji. It's a good restaurant. And it's really interesting. You might have been in high school at that time, but they would let y'all go over, and that all got stopped. And
Probably because of us.
and about 1970, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's about when the football team started.
I'm not quite that old.
Was Mr. Carr at the middle school?
Yes, sir. My mother was a cheerleader for him when he coached basketball.
He was a big old guy, and he would come in and buy cigars from us.
Really? I didn't know he smoked cigarettes.
And I guess you knew George Dollinger too. Did you ever get whipped?
Nope.
I didn't ever get, well, they didn't whip when I was in school.
Never
but-
seen Dean Gray either.
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.